Chapter 4. Mirror. Mirror. The early morning light filtered through the windows of the Pokemon Center, casting a soft, golden glow over the room. It was still quiet, the hum of the center's machines and the occasional chirp of a waking Pidgey, the only sounds breaking the silence. Ash lay in his bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, his mind foggy with a mixture of exhaustion and confusion. He had barely slept the night before. His dreams had been filled with strange, unsettling images that left him feeling more restless than rested. For the past few months, Ash had been trying, really trying, not to think about the changes. He had told himself again and again that it was just stress, or maybe the result of all the time they had been spending outdoors. But now, as he lay in bed, the familiar feeling of unease gnawing at the pit of his stomach, he knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong. With a sigh, Ash sat up, running a hand through his hair. It felt soft, almost too soft, slipping through his fingers like silk. His eyes narrowed as he looked down at the strands, which had grown so long they now brushed against his shoulders in loose waves. He had meant to cut it several times over the past few weeks, but every time he picked up a pair of scissors, something had stopped him. At first, he had told himself he was just being lazy, but now it felt like something else. His hair had changed in more ways than just length. As the sunlight spilled through a window, catching the strands, Ash noticed a few glimmers of gold mixed in with his usual raven black hair. His heart skipped a beat. That couldn't be right. He leaned closer, pulling a lock of hair in front of his face and squinting at it. There, woven through the black, were unmistakable streaks of pale blonde. He blinked, his heart racing. What the hell? For a moment, he considered the possibility that it was just from being out in the sun so much. Serena had mentioned that sometimes her hair lightened when she spent too much time outside. But this wasn't just a tan or some sun-kissed highlights. These were streaks of golden blonde, the exact same shade as Serena's hair. Ash's breath quickened, and the familiar tightness in his chest returned. He threw the covers off and stood up, his legs feeling shaky beneath him. Moving quickly, he crossed the room to the small mirror hanging on the wall beside the bathroom. He had been avoiding mirrors for weeks, not wanting to confront the subtle changes he could feel happening beneath the surface. But now, as he stood in front of the glass, he couldn't avoid it any longer. The face staring back at him wasn't his. Or, at least, it didn't feel like his. His features had softened even more since the last time he had dared to look. His once sharp jawline had rounded out, and his cheeks were fuller, giving his face a more delicate, feminine appearance. His eyes, though still the same dark brown, seemed larger, framed by long lashes that had definitely not been there before. His lips were fuller too, softer, and his skin had taken on a smooth, almost porcelain-like quality, completely free of the roughness that had come from years of outdoor adventuring. Ash's hands trembled as he reached up to touch his face, his fingers brushing lightly over the unfamiliar softness of his skin. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel like him. His chest tightened, and for the first time in months, panic began to set in. No, he muttered under his breath, his voice shaky. He turned away from the mirror, running both hands through his hair, tugging at the long strands in frustration. This can't be happening. He grabbed the pair of scissors he had left on the dresser, holding them up to his hair. He had to cut it. He had to do something to make himself feel like himself again. But as he raised the blades to the golden-streaked locks, a strange, overwhelming sense of wrongness washed over him. His hands froze, He stared at his reflection, the scissors trembling in his grip. Cutting his hair, something he had done countless times before, suddenly felt like a violation, like he was about to destroy something precious. The thought made his stomach churn, and after a moment of internal struggle, he lowered the scissors, setting them back down on the dresser with a shaky breath. "What is wrong with me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Later that morning, Ash and Serena were making their way through a nearby forest, heading toward the next town. The path was narrow, overgrown with vines and branches, and Ash found himself struggling to keep up. His clothes, already feeling too loose in some places and too tight in others, kept getting caught on the underbrush. His pants, in particular, had become an issue. They were too long now, dragging along the ground and constantly catching on roots and rocks. "Be careful, Ash!" Serena called back to him with a laugh as she gracefully hopped over a fallen log. "You're going to trip if you keep dragging your feet like that." I'm fine, Ash muttered, more to himself than to her. But no sooner had the words left his mouth than his foot caught on a stray vine, sending him tumbling forward. His pants snagged on a branch, ripping the fabric, and he landed face first in the mud with a loud splat. Pikachu leaped off Ash's shoulder just before the fall, landing gracefully beside him with a concerned squeak. Pika! Ash groaned, pushing himself up on his hands and knees, his face and clothes now covered in mud. Great, just great. He yanked at his pants, which were now torn at the knee, the fabric hanging loosely around his legs. Everything felt too big, too awkward. His shoes, which had once fit snugly, now felt too loose, and his jacket, which he had loved so much, was starting to feel like it belonged to someone else. Serena, having doubled back to help, knelt beside him, concern written all over her face. Ash, are you okay?" Ash didn't answer right away. He was too busy staring down at himself, at the way his clothes hung awkwardly on his too slender frame, his heart thudding painfully in his chest. He felt wrong, like his body didn't fit him anymore. Serena reached out, brushing some mud off his cheek. "You're a mess," she said gently, though there was a hint of humor in her voice. Come on, let's get you cleaned up." Ash nodded mutely, allowing Serena to help him to his feet. His pants were still dragging on the ground, and he felt ridiculous, like a kid wearing hand-me-downs that didn't fit. They made their way back to the Pokemon Center, where Ash quickly cleaned himself up in the bathroom. But as he stood in front of the mirror, wiping the mud from his face, his reflection only served to remind him of how much he had changed. His clothes didn't fit. His face didn't feel like his. His hair. He couldn't even bring himself to cut his hair. What was happening to him? When Ash stepped out of the bathroom, Serena was waiting for him with a small pile of clothes in her arms. She smiled at him, though there was a hint of concern in her eyes. I, brought you some clothes," she said, holding them out to him. "I know it's not exactly what you're used to, but you've worn them before, right? It's no big deal." Ash's eyes widened as he looked down at the clothes Serena was offering. A pair of her yoga tights, a white tank top, a set of high-heeled boots, and a small lacy thong undergarment that looked more like a piece of tissue paper than underwear. His heart skipped a beat, and he felt his face flush with embarrassment. "Serena, your clothes aren't fitting you right," Serena interrupted gently, but firmly. "You keep tripping over them, and they're falling apart. Just wear these for now, until we can find something that fits you better." Ash hesitated, his mind racing. He wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her that he'd figure something else out, but the truth was, she was right. His clothes weren't fitting him anymore, and he couldn't keep stumbling around like this. Then Serena pipes up again and removes all though of going against it. "And besides, it wasn't like you haven't worn my underwear and clothes before. Just make sure you tuck your manhood between your legs so you don't stretch the front of my pants out, okay?" Serena said confidently. Back when they had swapped bodies, he had no choice. But that was different. Back then, he had been Serena. Now he was still Ash. Wasn't he? He swallowed hard, nodding reluctantly. "Okay, I guess. I guess it's fine." Serena smiled, her eyes softening with relief. Great. I'll give you some privacy to change." Ash took the clothes and disappeared back into the bathroom, his heart pounding in his chest. He stared down at the yoga tights, tank top and the underwear, his hands trembling as he unfolded them. The fabric was soft, delicate, and stretchy, and it felt foreign in his hands. He firstly pulled the thong up his now smooth legs, feeling a little excited at the feel, to not rousing any reaction from his manhood, which was limp and small, not pulling them up and tucking his junk back between his legs. The thong sat neatly on his hips, which were not wider and the back tucked between his ballooning rump. Then he slipped the tights on, wincing as they hugged his legs snugly, molding to his slimmer frame in a way that felt both strange and oddly comfortable. The tank top was next, and though it fit loosely around his torso, it felt light and airy compared to the heavy jacket he had been wearing. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the person staring back. The clothes fit so well, too well. The tights clung to his legs, flat in the front, accentuating their new length and slenderness. And the tank top, though simple, seemed to complement the softness of his features. He felt a strange mixture of discomfort and something else, something he couldn't quite name. He slipped on Serena's boots, the slight heel adding a couple of inches to his height. They fit better than his own shoes had, though the unfamiliar weight of the heel made him feel a little unsteady on his feet. Ash stared at his reflection, his mind spinning. He didn't look like himself. He didn't feel like himself. He felt like he was slipping further and further away from who he used to be, and it terrified him. When Ash stepped out of the bathroom, Serena was waiting for him, her eyes lighting up in surprise as she took in his appearance. Wow, she said, smiling warmly. "You look really good." Ash's face flushed, and he looked away, feeling a strange warmth spreading through his chest. Thanks. I guess." He tugged at the hem of the tank top, feeling self-conscious. "It feels weird, though." Serena nodded, her expression softening. "I get it, but you'll get used to it. And hey, it's just temporary, right? Right?" Ash nodded, though, inside, he wasn't so sure. He could feel the changes accelerating now, and he didn't know how much longer he could pretend everything was fine. The person he saw in the mirror wasn't him anymore. Not really. He was becoming someone else, and he didn't know why. Serena watched him for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly. "Ash, are you sure you're okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but insistent. "You've been acting different lately, and I'm worried about you." Ash's stomach twisted, and for a brief moment, he considered telling her everything, the dreams, the changes, the way his body didn't feel like his anymore. But then the fear crept in, the fear of how she might react, of what this might mean for him, for them. I'm fine. I'm fine, he said quickly, forcing a smile. Really? I'm just tired, I guess. I guess. Serena didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Okay, okay, she said quietly. But if you ever want to talk, I'm here. You know that, right? Right? Ash nodded, though, inside, he wasn't sure if he could talk to her about what was really happening. He wasn't even sure if he understood it yet. As they left the Pokemon Center and headed back out into the bright morning light, Ash couldn't shake the feeling that he was running out of time. The changes were happening faster now, and he didn't know how much longer he could hold on to the person he used to be. And for the first time, as the wind tugged at his now blonde-streaked hair, Ash wondered if the person he used to be was already gone.